It was supposed to be a simple flight from Dubai to London, a journey filled with routine travelers, business people, and families heading home. The sky outside was calm, streaked with soft daylight over endless clouds. Inside the cabin, passengers settled into their seats, the hum of engines steady and reassuring. Among them sat Maya Patel, a 32-year-old engineer known for her quiet, thoughtful nature. She placed her laptop in the seat pocket, leaned back, and smiled politely at the elderly woman beside her. The captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be cruising at 34,000 feet. Sit back and enjoy your flight." Everything felt ordinary, almost too ordinary. But sometimes, the calm before chaos is the most deceptive. Without warning, a loud thud echoed from the rear cabin. Gasps filled the air as two men stood up suddenly, shouting commands in a foreign language. Fear spread like wildfire, passengers crying, some screaming, others frozen in disbelief. The crew tried to intervene, but panic overtook reason. Yet amid the rising chaos, one person didn't move, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. Maya's eyes tracked every motion calmly, her mind processing faster than her pulse. While everyone else panicked, she stayed still, quiet, and alert because deep down, she sensed that control, not fear, was her only weapon. While the hijackers barked orders, waving makeshift weapons, the cabin became a storm of panic. Some passengers pleaded for mercy, while others hid behind seats. The air felt thick, each second stretching like an eternity. But Maya sat motionless, her breathing steady, her gaze sharp. She observed details others missed. The trembling hands of one attacker, the nervous glances between them, and the fact that their weapons weren't military grade. They were desperate, scared themselves. She knew panic feeds panic. Across the aisle, a flight attendant whispered prayers, her hand shaking. Maya gently reached over, pressing her palm against the attendant's hand, whispering, "Breathe. Don't draw attention." The attendant nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Maya's composure spread like quiet energy. Even a few passengers around her began to steady their breathing, taking cues from her silence. The hijackers shouted again, demanding the cockpit be opened, but their voices wavered. One stumbled slightly as turbulence rocked the plane, the daylight outside cutting sharply through the small windows. Maya's mind worked methodically. She had once trained in crisis communication during an engineering project abroad. "Stay calm. Think clearly. Assess before acting," she reminded herself silently. The world around her was chaos, but her thoughts were precision. To her, this wasn't just survival. It was problem-solving at 34,000 feet. Minutes turned into hours. The hijackers argued among themselves, uncertain, sweating, their fear now visible. The passengers had stopped screaming, exhaustion replacing terror. The pilot's muffled voice from the cockpit tried reasoning with them, but they refused to listen. Maya, however, noticed something critical. One of the men, the youngest of them, kept glancing toward the emergency exit with trembling eyes. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was terrified. When one hijacker went forward to threaten the crew, Maya leaned slightly toward the nervous young man and whispered softly, "You don't want this. You still have a choice." Her voice was calm, grounded, real. He froze, glancing at her. "They'll kill me," he muttered under his breath. "Not if you help us stop them," she said gently, locking eyes with him. There was no judgment in her tone, only truth. The young man's breathing grew heavier, and for a moment, he looked like a frightened child lost in a world too cruel. The plane rocked slightly, sunlight flashing across his face. Maya's quiet strength began to crack his fear. The moment was fragile but powerful, one human recognizing another's weakness not as danger, but as opportunity. She didn't raise her voice, didn't demand heroism. She simply offered choice, and that changed everything. The young man's eyes darted around before he gave a tiny nod. It was enough. Maya subtly reached for the attendant's attention, signaling a silent plan. Through faint hand gestures and whispers, they began aligning, timing the hijackers' movements, marking their positions. The cabin filled with nervous energy, passengers still pretending to be afraid, though hope was quietly reborn. Maya guided the young man's breathing, telling him when to move, when to stay. The plan was simple but dangerous. Wait until one hijacker turned his back near the cockpit door. Outside, daylight still streamed through the windows, bright and unreal against the tension inside. Then it happened. The older hijacker moved forward to shout at the pilot. The young man seized the moment, grabbing his arm while Maya lunged, disarming him of a blunt object. Passengers screamed again, but this time it wasn't in fear, it was in fight. The crew joined in, securing the attackers with seat belts and cables. The chaos that began in panic ended in defiance. When the pilot finally opened the door, his face was pale with disbelief. "Ow, how did you?" he stammered. Maya simply exhaled, her tone even, "I just stayed calm." When the plane landed safely hours later, daylight still shone over the runway. News crews, police, and emergency teams swarmed the tarmac. Passengers were escorted out, some weeping, others hugging strangers. The young man who helped was taken into custody quietly, his eyes full of regret, but also gratitude. The pilot stepped out last, shaking Maya's hand with genuine awe. "You saved every soul on this flight," he said softly. Maya smiled faintly, her calm still unshaken. "We all did," she replied. Within hours, her story spread worldwide. The woman who stayed calm. Interviews flooded in, but she refused the spotlight. For her, heroism wasn't about fame. It was about reason over panic, clarity over fear. Reporters described her as the calmest passenger in aviation history, but she disappeared from public view soon after, returning to her quiet life. Yet her story lived on, inspiring millions. Videos of the event became viral, classrooms studied her reaction, and crisis trainers quoted her composure as an example of true courage. Sometimes, the most powerful act isn't loud. It's calm, focused, and silent. The world would remember her not for what she did, but for how she did it. She stayed calm while everyone else panicked and changed everything.